Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. For years, the legacy media has ignored the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was connected to intelligence. And after his death, they continued to ignore it. They acted like anybody who talked about that sort of thing is a conspiracy theorist and there's no evidence or proof. Meanwhile, anybody who's been following the case or had dug even a little bit deeper than the surface understood what was really going on here. You didn't need to be an investigator to figure out what was going on here. You didn't need to be some sort of, professional prosecutor to understand that Epstein was being protected from on high. But the legacy media willingly ignored all of it. And now that Epstein has been dead and actual investigative journalists and researchers have been digging into the case, now the legacy media wants to jump on board and say, oh, well, Epstein might have been connected to intelligence. He might have been a spy. Yeah, no shit. Welcome to the party, pal. Today's article is from Fox News, and it's basically what I just talked about. Now, the headline is, Jeffrey Epstein's alleged spy ties under fresh scrutiny in new book. Before, they wouldn't even run stuff like this on like Fox News or CNN or anything like that. And not that I find any of these outlets credible, because I do not. But I just find it hilarious that a few months ago, everybody was a conspiracy theorist, and now all of a sudden the legacy media is jumping on board. It's just like with Twitter, how they banned people when this whole entire COVID-19 thing started. They were banning people who were saying that it could have been a leak from a lab. Not that it was a chemical weapon released on the populace by the Chinese government, but a mistake. And it could have, left the lab and contaminated the food market, et cetera, whatever it may be. But no way, the legacy media couldn't have it. You can't run a narrative counter to ours. And their friends over at Twitter cut it back and started throwing people off of Twitter and canceling their accounts over it. Meanwhile, it starts to come out now that that story there has legs. That's definitely an option. That's definitely a possibility. See, the legacy media, what they want to do is control the narrative at all costs, and they're very good at it. They've been doing it forever. And now that other people are getting involved, citizen journalists and investigative journalists, et cetera, they're losing their grip on the narrative. And they understand that they are no longer in control, and they better get with the times. So you're seeing a lot more of the legacy media now starting to pick up on what was used to be considered a conspiracy theory. But for us that have been following the case, we know it's not a conspiracy theory. We know it's a cover-up. All right, so headline, Jeffrey Epstein's alleged spy ties under fresh scrutiny in new book. Again, this is on foxnews.com, and the author is Holly McKay. The life and death of Jeffrey Epstein remains something of a sordid mystery movie. Say that again. More than 10 months since his shocking death, it is still unclear how the disgraced financier, pedophile, rose through the ranks to amass a black book of high-profile contacts and world leaders, why he was able to enter such a quietly negotiated sweetheart plea deal in 2007, despite a sex offender conviction, the conditions of which he was left to supposedly take his own life in a Manhattan jail cell, and precisely how the self-styled billionaire, financier, pedophile made his many millions. And there are many different avenues to explore. Jeffrey Epstein, when he was at Bear & Stearns, he was involved in some scumbaggery. He was involved in some fraudulent money crimes. And he just built on that going forward. The man, look, for all of his disgusting faults, The man knew how to manipulate the financial system. He knew how to launder money. He knew how to finesse Title 31 regulations. And this was a man who was able to do all of that, not just because he was slick, not just because he understood the financial system, but because his friends were the ones who wrote the laws. His friends were the ones who advised him how to use those loopholes. And those friends are the same people are putting up on a pedestal and worshiping as these fantastic politicians who care about us. Breaking news, everybody. They do not care about you. A recently released book purports to shed light at least on the latter, revealing that he may have made at least some big bucks and granted something of a free pass for his decades of wrongdoing through covert intelligence action. Well, Fox News, it's about time that you have something like this on your website. I mean, it's obvious that Epstein had ties to intelligence. It's obvious that Acosta was told to keep his hands off of Epstein for that very reason. And it is also obvious that the CIA has their thumbprints everywhere in this case. Again, I know a lot of people want to foist all the blame on the Mossad here. I'm not one of those people. Do I believe the Mossad played their role? Absolutely. Do I believe that they were the ones who came up with the plot? Probably. But as far as facilitating it in the United States of America, there is zero chance that the Mossad was doing this covertly. There is zero chance of it, people. The CIA knows all. And if you think that an operation like this was being run by just the Mossad, you are not paying attention. Because Jeffrey Epstein was being worked by multiple intelligence services. Multiple, folks. While the notion of Epstein as a spy has long run rampant in the rumor mill, the book Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales, authored by Dylan Howard, Melissa Cronin, and James Robertson, proclaims that he had ties to Mossad, the Israeli National Intelligence Agency. And a shout out to Melissa Cronin. She does great work. She's really fantastic. And I really enjoyed this book, Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales, and I highly suggest that you pick it up if you haven't yet. I'm going to try and reach out to Melissa Cronin as well and see if maybe she wants to pop onto the podcast and talk with us about her book. When we set out to write a book about his crimes, we thought we knew the whole story. Before long, however, what we uncovered was compelling evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was a spy, largely for Israel's Mossad, and allowed to operate in the United States seemingly without consequence. Dylan Howard told Fox News, "This is a much bigger story than the world has ever known and is continually being ignored and glossed over in much of the new reporting about Epstein." 100% Dylan Howard, my man. This is what we need. We need people like him and Melissa Cronin and the rest of these folks when they come on to shows like this. It does the whole case good because these are people that know what they're talking about. These are people that have researched what is going on. And these aren't people that are shooting from the hip. They aren't just throwing out pie in the sky conspiracy theories. These are well thought out, well researched avenues of discussion here. And the mainstream media, legacy media, has done us such a disservice by not putting their feet all the way into the water here and just dipping a toe in. We need a full investigation into all of this, all the different threads, all of the different people involved, etc., etc. What we need is an all-encompassing documentary, one that touches on everything. You know, I'm talking a 10-part series where we can really delve into everything. If I had the ability to do something like that, that is what I would put all of my time and effort into, is making a documentary, an all-encompassing documentary that spans 10 episodes that really digs into everything that is right below the surface, talks about all the players, the Dubins, the Wexners, etc., etc. We really need something like that in this case. Indeed, Epstein's political associations over the years were numerous, ranging from President Donald Trump, former President Bill Clinton, and the UK's Prince Andrew, and former Prime Minister Tony Blair, to Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Now look, Those of you who know me know that my core of study has been the geopolitical situation in the Middle East. And when it comes to Saudi Arabia and it comes to sick behavior by these sort of people, these royals, these sultans, these oil barons within Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, I can completely confirm that some sordid, disgusting shit takes place. Now, I'm not going to jump into details of that here on the podcast because it's not really relevant. But what I will say is you can always, have an idea about people by the company they keep, right? And when Epstein, the way he would hang out with these disgusting oil barons, what do you think? He was just over there discussing business folks? Or do you think he was partaking in whatever sick, sordid... I don't even want to think about what was going on in places like that. He, Epstein, used his power to exploit the vulnerable and underaged, all the while covering his tracks with the innermost circles of the establishment. He used his access to trap the rich and famous and traded in the dirt he had on them to the world's most secretive intelligence agencies, Howard continued. The conclusion of our reporting is clear. Epstein was a spy running a complex intelligence operation for the purpose of blackmailing powerful individuals and politicians in the United States and abroad. But for whom? And that is the lingering question for those of us who have been following the case, right? We know he's being run by intelligence services, and in my opinion, like I've said, he is probably an asset of Mossad, but I believe the overarching picture is being painted by the CIA. Nobody is going to convince me the CIA's dirty fingers weren't all over this. Zero chance that happens, and zero chance anyone can convince me of that without a lot of strong evidence. Epstein himself was purportedly known to tell others that he had dirt on powerful people, raising red flags as to whether prominent individuals were either lured into his illicit sex ring and then forced to pay up or keep quiet. And we know that's the case. We know that there's dossiers on all of these people. And we also know, which not many people talk about, but it's something I've hammered home here on this podcast, is that the academics that were around Jeffrey Epstein were very guilty. They are very much involved in this. And, in my opinion, they are also passing on science secrets to Jeffrey Epstein too, classified projects, etc., etc. And what he did with those, in my estimation, was he sold those to foreign intelligence agencies. My friends, how much more of a perfect picture do you need painted before you understand that this man, this disgusting piece of human excrement, Jeffrey Epstein, was working for intelligence? Soon after Epstein was arrested by federal officials at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey last year on a fresh round of trafficking charges, then U.S. Secretary of Labor Alexander Acosta came under fire for his role in overseeing the 2007 Epstein deal while a U.S. attorney in Miami. Again, Acosta, a part of the plot, right? Definitely a yes man, but it went much higher than that, folks. Don't just focus on Acosta like they try to make you do. You got to dig deeper. It's easy just to say, oh, well, this is all Acosta's fault. But that's not how it works in the Justice Department. For something like that, that has to get kicked all the way up top. That's a Mukasey type deal. So we have to dig deeper there. And don't get me wrong, Acosta deserved to be fired and he should have resigned. But if we act like the buck just stops there, we're never going to dig deep enough. Moreover, questions still swirl as it pertains to his once girlfriend, co-conspirator, and confidant Neala Maxwell, who has been widely accused of aiding his solicitation of underage girls for sex, and how and why she has flown under the radar since his arrest by the FBI last summer and his subsequent death. Well, we know why. She's still being protected. If Jeffrey Berman was serious about his job, if Jeffrey Berman really wanted to bring justice to these survivors, he'd send out his boys, the G-men, to go and swoop Neala Maxwell up and get this party started. Now, we have seen some movement looking like there's some things going on behind the scenes, but we don't have any concrete evidence one way or the other, right? So, Neala Maxwell, somehow, some way, is still ducking and dodging justice. A Page 6 report earlier this year cited an unnamed source indicating that she had intelligence ties of her own, thus is protected because of the information she has on the world's most powerful people and was being kept in safe houses. Look, she is definitely being protected. The government has the ability to find people no matter where they are in the world for the most part. Meanwhile, Neala Maxwell is pulling the hokey dokey on the federal government. She's being protected for sure by the same services that are supposed to be looking for her. That is definitely where I'm at. That is most certainly my opinion at this point. Maxwell's own father, British press baron Robert Maxwell, was plagued by conspiracies that he too was an undercover intelligence operative for Israel. That's not a conspiracy theory. You don't get a state-run funeral the way Bob Maxwell got if you didn't, you weren't helping out the nation of Israel. Stop it. Just stop it. It's obvious, okay? It is rather obvious that Robert Maxwell was not only a spy for Israel, but that he had connections to the CIA and also the KGB. Much of the explosive claims made in the new book come from the Iranian-born, self-proclaimed former Israeli spy Ari Ben Menage, who says he served as the handler for Robert Maxwell and introduced Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein, and Mossad. We've heard that earlier on in the case. We talked about this. We talked about Ari Ben Menage and what he had to say, and he's credible. What he has to say is credible, folks. And of course, the establishment's going to deny it. Of course, they're going to try and destroy him and hit him with a hatchet job because they don't want to lose their hold on the narrative. Remember, information is the most precious and expensive commodity. However, Israel denied Menage's intelligence links soon after he was arrested in 1989 in the U.S. on charges of arms dealing. However, he was acquitted the following year. Oh, I'm sure he was. I'm sure George Bush and his CIA ties stepped right in to make sure that the arms dealer was acquitted and he was back in action doing whatever it is that the CIA had planned for him. Mr. Epstein was the simple idiot who was going around providing girls to all kinds of politicians in the United States. See, effing around is not a crime. It could be embarrassing, but it's not a crime. But having sex with a 14-year-old girl is a crime. A passage attributed to Ben Menage reads in the book. And he was taking photos of politicians effing 14-year-old girls, if you want to get it straight. They would just blackmail people. They would just blackmail people like that. And folks, we know that this is the case. And we get more confirmation here from Ari Ben Menage, but we know from the survivors themselves what was going on here. All of this is just butter on the bread for me, or like I always say, a little more meat on the bone, right? The more meat on the bone, the better the dish. And that's what's going on here. So it's a slow trickle, but eventually it's going to build up to a huge gusher. And that's where we're at right now, because we're hearing from guys like Ari Ben Menage. We're hearing from the authors of the book, Melissa Cronin, etc., etc. And more, the legacy media is being forced to understand that this is not a conspiracy theory, that this is not just some BS we're throwing against the wall here. This is a cover-up of epic proportions that spans continents, folks. Nonetheless, the unanswered questions as they pertain to Epstein still abound. According to Dylan, Epstein used the classic honey trap or love trap, as it is sometimes known, to build his blackmail files. We called this out from the very beginning. As somebody who has spent many hours researching the Middle East and the geopolitical situation in Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, Syria, etc., this is a hallmark of the Mossad. They love setting up honey traps. You know how many imams they've caught up in this? How many members of Hamas they've caught up in this? And then they've used that information to turn them into assets for them? This was old when Babylon was young, folks. Even for those who did not fall for his ruse, their simple presence in his orbit was enough for Epstein to gather intelligence, he said. Epstein was calculated. He rubbed shoulders with those who could unwittingly provide him information and intelligence. For sure, that was his MO. His whole entire plan and plot was to get on the inside and either A, compile dossiers on these people so he could blackmail them, or try and pilfer information any way he could. And while the criminal case against Epstein was subsequently dropped as a result of his death, civil suits put forward by alleged survivors of his purported sex ring and squabbles over his estate and finances continue. Just last week, a leading law enforcement official in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where Epstein owned his islands, demanded to know why Epstein's estate has not yet explained irregularities in a series of unexplained transactions involving some $39 million before and after his death, according to the New York Times. Well, we talked about that as well. There's a lot of money irregularities here, all right? A lot of irregularities with money. So I don't understand how just that alone doesn't have all of these people brought in on RICO indictments. In a court filing last week, Denise George, the Attorney General for the U.S. Virgin Islands, stated that she was against removing a criminal activity lien she placed on his $600 million estate, given the sex trafficking indictment filed by the DOJ before he died. She pointed to the unrecognized $39 million worth of transactions pertaining to Southern Country International, an international banking entity Epstein set up in 2014 to handle funds only from non-domestic customers. George thus stated that some of the transactions seemingly breached the banker's charter. Yeah, of course they do. What do you think? That just happened because the regulators set it up that way so that people on their island wouldn't be getting scammed out of Jeffrey Epstein. But the rest of us, who cares? Let them all get scammed. Let Epstein make a killing on the rest of the people. Again, another reason why I am not a fan of the Virgin Islands trying to set themselves up as some sort of victim in this case. Fox News cannot independently verify the spy claims set out in the book, but it may all just be the tip of the iceberg. Howard noted that others have more recently reached out with first-hand avowals of Epstein's intel ties. I do not believe Epstein worked exclusively for the Mossad. I believe many countries sought information from him, and he also shopped information to the highest bidder. It also helps explain how Epstein was able to build a puzzling billion-dollar fortune, Howard added. So, not only was Epstein running a shocking criminal enterprise, as described by the FBI, but it was one of the deep business and intelligence ties across a number of countries. Folks, how long have I been telling you this? How long have I been sitting here yelling and screaming from the mountaintops about this? Months. Months and months and months. I'm so happy to see that Melissa Cronin and Dylan Howard wrote this book because it really does shed some light on what's going on. And if you have not picked this book up yet, I highly suggest you do. Grab it, read it, and like usual, process the information for yourself. Follow the evidence for yourself, folks. You know that's what I'm always talking about here. Don't believe anybody. Follow the evidence for yourself. Do the research. Do the legwork. And when you read all of these articles and you put them together and you start following the breadcrumbs, when you get to the destination that you seek, it is jaw-dropping what you find. And books like this, and books like Bradley Edwards' book, they're very important additions if you are really serious about finding the truth in this case. All right, folks, if you'd like to contact me, you could do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. Thank you to everybody who has donated to the GoFundMe. I appreciate all of you. Until later on, folks.